I'm pregnant, Elliot. With triplets. Your triplets. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Elliot Reed, billionaire, financial titan, master of Manhattan's skyline, stood frozen, unable to process what his estranged wife had just revealed. That's impossible, he whispered, his voice barely audible. We haven't. The night before you left, Vivian said quietly, one protective hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Our last night together. Remember? The color drained from Elliot's face as realization dawned. In 3 months, he hadn't once considered that their final desperate embrace might have created life. Now here she stood, carrying not 1 but 3 children, his children, while divorce papers waited on his desk. Why tell me now? He asked, his voice breaking. Why not let me sign those papers and walk away clean? Vivian's eyes, those same amber eyes that had once looked at him with such love, held his gaze steadily. Because despite everything, they deserve to know their father. And you deserve to decide what kind of man you want to be. Friends, if you've ever wondered what truly matters in life, or if second chances are possible after terrible mistakes, stay with me. This story might just change how you see everything. Every success story has a price. For billionaire Elliot Reed, that price was becoming a stranger to the woman he'd once sworn to cherish forever. But sometimes, life offers us unexpected chances to rediscover what truly matters, if we're brave enough to take them. Elliot stood at the window of his downtown penthouse, watching snow blanket the city in pristine white. The skyline, a jagged silhouette of buildings he'd helped finance, sparkled with holiday lights, but the beauty did nothing to warm the chill that had settled in his chest. Christmas Eve, and he was alone. Again. The divorce papers sat unsigned on his mahogany desk. His lawyer had advised waiting until after the holidays, but Elliot saw no reason to delay. His marriage to Vivian had been over for months, a casualty of his relentless pursuit of wealth and power. The separation had been her idea, but the divorce was inevitable. He sipped his bourbon, the amber liquid burning a path down his throat. At 43, he'd built Reed Capital into a financial empire that managed billions. His name appeared regularly in Forbes. His charitable foundation funded hospitals and schools. By all conventional measures, Elliot Reed was a success. But standing in his immaculate penthouse surrounded by tasteful, expensive things that meant nothing to him, he felt hollowed out. He moved to his desk, fingers tracing the edges of the divorce documents. 15 years of marriage reduced to legal terminology and signature lines. The memory of their last real fight surfaced unbidden. You missed our anniversary dinner. Again. Vivian's voice had been quiet, which was somehow worse than yelling. The Singapore investors couldn't reschedule, he'd explained, loosening his tie. This deal represents $300 million. Yes, I know. Vivian had turned away, shoulders slumped in defeat. They all represent millions. Every missed dinner, every cancelled vacation, every time you chose your company over us, they all add up to billions now, don't they? That money secures our future, he'd insisted. Vivian had looked at him then, really looked at him, with an expression he couldn't decipher. What future, Elliot? We don't exist outside your schedule anymore. His phone buzzed, pulling him back to the empty present. Probably Marcus, his VP, with another crisis that couldn't wait until after Christmas. Elliot almost ignored it, but years of conditioning had him reaching for the device. The text wasn't from Marcus. I need to see you. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. It's important. Vivian asterisk. Elliot stared at the message, his heart performing an odd stutter. In 15 years of marriage, Vivian had never been cryptic. She was forthright, passionate, clear. Qualities that had first drawn him to her and later drove them apart when his ambition began to eclipse everything else. He typed 3 different responses before settling on simple acknowledgement. I'll be there, asterisk. Sleep eluded him that night. His mind conjured 100 scenarios for Vivian's summons, each more unlikely than the last. By morning, dark circles shadowed his eyes as he dressed in a charcoal suit, armor for whatever lay ahead. Snow continued to fall as his driver navigated toward the brownstone they'd once shared. Elliot hadn't been back since moving out 3 months ago. The familiar street brought a wave of memories, Vivian planting tulips in the small front garden, Sunday mornings reading the paper together by the bay window, arguments that started small but grew as his absences lengthened and his priorities shifted. He remembered their first night in that house, how they'd celebrated with cheap champagne on the floor because their furniture hadn't arrived. How Vivian had laughed when he proposed toasting with plastic cups, her head thrown back, eyes crinkled with joy. To our future, he'd said then, meaning it with all his heart. Where had that man gone? The one who could look at his wife and see his whole world. The car stopped. "Wait here," he instructed his driver, stepping onto the snow-dusted sidewalk. Before he could knock, the door opened. Vivian stood framed in the entryway, elegant as always in a simple sweater and jeans, her dark hair swept into a loose knot. Something in her expression, a mixture of resolve and apprehension, made Elliot's stomach tighten. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. The house smelled the same, cinnamon and vanilla, Vivian's signature scents. Christmas decorations adorned the entryway, including the hand-carved wooden angels they'd collected during their honeymoon in Prague. She'd kept up traditions even as their marriage crumbled. "Would you like coffee?" she asked, leading him toward the kitchen. "Vivian, what's this about?" Elliot remained standing, unwilling to settle into the comfort of what was no longer his home. She turned, meeting his gaze directly. "I've been trying to find the right time, the right way to tell you this, but there isn't one." She drew a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Elliot." The words didn't register immediately. When they did, he felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath him. "That's impossible," he said automatically. "We haven't." 3 months ago. The night before you left." Her voice was steady. "Remember?" He did remember. A rare evening when he'd come home before midnight. Vivian waiting up. An argument that somehow transformed into desperate reconciliation. The last time they'd been truly intimate before he moved out. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, voice hollow. "The divorce." "I'm not trying to stop the divorce," Vivian interrupted. "I'm telling you because you have a right to know. This child exists, Elliot. What you do with that information is up to you." He sank into a kitchen chair, the implications crashing over him. A child. His child. Their child. "I'll be raising this baby," Vivian continued. "With or without your involvement. I've thought about it carefully, and I want this child, Elliot. I always wanted children with you." The unspoken accusation hung in the air between them. Children had been Vivian's dream, one that Elliot had repeatedly deferred. There was always another deal, another expansion, another reason to wait. Until Vivian stopped asking. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to say anything right now." She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, a protective gesture that made something twist painfully in Elliot's chest. "I just thought you should know before signing those papers." The silence stretched between them, filled with years of lost opportunities and growing distance. "How are you feeling?" he finally asked, the question awkward but sincere. A flicker of surprise crossed Vivian's face. "The morning sickness is brutal. But otherwise, everything looks good so far." "And you're doing this alone?" "My sister's been helping." She hesitated. "My parents don't know yet. I wanted to tell you first." Elliot nodded, appreciating the courtesy though he knew he didn't deserve it. He glanced around the kitchen, at the refrigerator where Vivian still displayed his mother's handwritten recipes, at the breakfast nook where they'd once spent lazy Sunday mornings planning their future. "I should go," he said abruptly, standing. The reality of impending fatherhood was too overwhelming to process in her presence. "I need to think." Of course. Vivian walked him to the door, maintaining a careful distance. Take whatever time you need. He paused at the threshold, snow falling softly behind him. Thank you. For telling me. She nodded once, her expression unreadable. Merry Christmas, Elliot. He left in a daze, snow falling harder around him as he returned to the car. His driver asked for a destination, but Elliot had none to give. Instead, he walked, through Central Park, past festive storefronts, through crowds of last-minute shoppers, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A child. His child. Arriving into a broken home before it was even born. If you're watching this and feeling moved by Elliot's predicament, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment that completely changed your life's direction. Families rushed past him, parents laden with packages, children squealing with delight at holiday displays. Elliot watched them with new awareness, seeing not anonymous crowds but individual stories, fathers holding tiny mittened hands, mothers adjusting scarves on squirming toddlers. He'd never envisioned himself in that role. Or rather, he'd always pushed it safely into some undefined future when he'd made it. But what was making it, if not having someone to share success with? The memory of his own father surfaced, distant, demanding, perpetually disappointed. The man who'd viewed his son as little more than a continuation of his legacy, a vessel for unrealized ambitions. Elliot had spent his adult life simultaneously rebelling against and inadvertently emulating that model. I'll be different, he whispered to the falling snow. But would he? Could he? Back in his penthouse, Elliot poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. Instead, he found himself staring at the divorce papers, seeing them with new eyes. Signing them now felt different, not just ending a marriage but potentially severing a connection to his unborn child before it began. He reached for his phone and pulled up the contact he hadn't used in weeks. Can we talk again? Tomorrow, asterisk. Vivian's response came quickly, asterisk Christmas dinner. 4 p.m. If you're sure, asterisk. The next day, Elliot arrived at the brownstone carrying a small gift-wrapped package. Vivian welcomed him with cautious warmth, accepting the gift with a puzzled expression. It's not what you think, he said as she unwrapped the small velvet box. Inside wasn't jewelry but a key. It's to a trust I've established for the baby. Whether we're together or not, I want our child taken care of. Something flickered across Vivian's face, disappointment, perhaps, though she quickly masked it. That's thoughtful. But Elliot, a child needs more than financial security. I know. He hesitated, struggling to articulate feelings he'd buried for so long. I've been thinking about what you said. About what I want. I don't know how to be a father, Vivian. My own wasn't exactly a model worth following. No one knows how at first, she said softly. It's something you learn by doing. The kitchen was filled with savory aromas, reminding Elliot of countless holiday meals they'd shared. Can I help with anything? You can set the table, Vivian replied, seeming surprised by the offer. Everything's where it always was. He moved around the dining room, laying out the plates and silverware, memories echoing with each familiar motion. The last time he performed this simple task, they'd been hosting his investors for a dinner Vivian had meticulously prepared. He'd barely noticed her efforts then, his mind consumed with closing the deal. I'm sorry, he said as she brought in the roast. For all of it. Vivian set down the serving dish. Elliot. No, please. Let me say this. He straightened the silverware nervously. I've been thinking about nothing else since yesterday. About how I've treated you. About the promises I made and broke. I got so caught up in building something impressive that I forgot why I wanted success in the first place. And why was that? She asked quietly. To build a life with you, he admitted. A good life, where we'd never worry about money the way my parents did. Where we could do meaningful things together. That was a beautiful dream. Vivian's voice held a wistful note. What happened to it? I happened to it. I kept moving the goalposts. First it was financial security, then it was the first million, then the first billion. The company kept growing, and I kept thinking the next milestone would be the one where I could finally relax. Elliot met her eyes. I was wrong. Christmas dinner was awkward but not unpleasant. They carefully avoided discussion of the divorce, focusing instead on neutral topics, mutual friends, a book Vivian had recently read, the restoration project at their favorite museum. It wasn't until dessert that Elliot broached the subject again. I'd like to be involved, he said finally. In the pregnancy. In our child's life. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to try. Vivian studied him, wariness in her eyes. You've chosen work over us for years, Elliot. What's changed? I have, he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Or I'm trying to. Finding out about the baby, it's forced me to think about what really matters. Thinking isn't doing, she reminded him gently. Give me a chance to show you, he said. To show myself. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed softly, marking the passing of Christmas Day. Outside, snow had stopped falling, leaving the world hushed and transformed. Vivian sighed, rubbing her temples in a gesture he recognized as her response to stress. All right, she said finally. My next appointment is January 3rd. If you're serious, you can come. I'll be there, he promised. I can move my... Don't tell me what you'll move, Vivian interrupted. Just be there. In the weeks that followed, Elliot made unprecedented changes. He delegated responsibilities at Reed Capital, setting boundaries around his time for the first time in his career. He attended every prenatal appointment, marveling at the grainy ultrasound images of his growing child. Everything looks healthy, Dr. Wilson assured them after the second visit. Strong heartbeat, good size for 12 weeks. And the morning sickness? Elliot asked, noting how pale Vivian had been when he'd picked her up. Unfortunately, that's part of the package for many women. It should subside by the second trimester. Outside the clinic, Elliot hesitated. Do you need anything? Groceries, medication. I'm not an invalid, Elliot, Vivian replied, but her tone lacked its usual edge. But thank you. He drove her home anyway, carrying her prenatal vitamins and the folder of information the doctor had provided. At her door, he paused awkwardly. Would you like to come in? She offered, surprising them both. They spent the afternoon reviewing baby name books and pregnancy guides, an oddly domestic scene given their separation. When Elliot finally left, something had subtly shifted between them. Not reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of a new kind of partnership. The divorce papers remained unsigned, tucked away in a drawer, not because either of them had illusions about reconciliation, but because both silently acknowledged their lives were in flux, outcomes uncertain. Elliot found a condo within walking distance of the brownstone, a compromise that allowed him space to rediscover himself while remaining close enough to be present for Vivian and their child. His executive assistant stared at him in shock when he announced he'd be leaving the office by 6 each evening. Is everything all right, Mr. Reed? She asked cautiously. Better than it's been in a long time, Diane. He smiled, surprising her further. And I'm not just saying that. I'm making some changes. Sir, the Tokyo meeting can happen via video conference, or Marcus can handle it. Elliot straightened his desk, another new habit. Family situation, he added, the words feeling strange but right on his tongue. It was during the 4th month that everything changed again. Mr. Reed? The doctor's expression was grave as she returned to the examination room where Elliot sat beside Vivian. We've detected something in the ultrasound I'd like to discuss. Elliot reached for Vivian's hand instinctively, surprised when she didn't pull away. There appear to be multiple fetuses, the doctor continued. In fact, we're detecting 3 separate heartbeats. Triplets. Vivian whispered, her grip tightening on Elliot's hand. The doctor nodded. It's relatively rare without fertility treatments, but it does happen naturally. I'd like to schedule more comprehensive testing and begin discussing a specialized care plan. Multiple births carry additional risks we need to monitor carefully. Outside the clinic, Vivian leaned against a wall, looking shell-shocked. 3 babies, she murmured. 3. Elliot felt equally stunned. What do you need? He asked, the question automatic but sincere. She looked at him with vulnerability he hadn't seen in years. I don't know if I can do this alone, Elliot. You won't have to, he promised, and for once, he meant it completely. Friends, sometimes life doesn't just change, it transforms completely. If you're finding this journey compelling, tap that like button and subscribe to Mr. Stephen's Stories for more powerful tales of transformation and redemption. The following week brought specialized appointments with high-risk pregnancy specialists. Terms like multifetal pregnancy reduction were discussed and firmly rejected by both Vivian and Elliot. They would face whatever challenges came with all 3 babies. I need to talk about work, Vivian said as they left the maternal fetal medicine specialist's office. As a museum curator, her job involved considerable walking and standing. They'll need to make accommodations. Do you want me to go with you? Elliot offered. She considered this, then nodded. Actually, yes. This affects both of us now. The meeting with Vivian's director went better than expected. Arrangements were made for a temporary assistant and reduced hours as her pregnancy progressed. Elliot watched with newfound respect as Vivian advocated for herself and their unborn children, her natural grace undiminished by circumstance. You're remarkable, he told her afterward as they walked through the museum's sculpture garden. You always have been. She glanced at him, surprised. That might be the first genuine compliment you've given me in years. The observation stung because it was true. I've been blind to a lot of things, he admitted. At 16 weeks, they learned they were expecting 2 boys and a girl. The sonogram technician pointed out tiny fingers and toes, miniature profiles, the chambers of 3 perfect hearts. They're beautiful, Elliot whispered, emotion thickening his voice. Vivian smiled, tears in her eyes. They are, aren't they? That evening, they sat at Vivian's kitchen table with 3 sets of name books, each marking possibilities for their children. Thomas for the first boy, Vivian suggested. After my grandfather. I like that, Elliot agreed. What about James for the second? James. She tested it, nodding. James Reed has a strong sound. And for our daughter, he asked, the possessive pronoun feeling both strange and right. Vivian's expression softened. I've always loved Lily. Lily, Elliot repeated. It's perfect. The moment felt sacred somehow, naming these tiny lives they'd created together. For the first time since learning of the pregnancy, Elliot fully realized he was going to be a father. Not in some abstract, distant way, but to 3 specific children with names and heartbeats and futures he would help shape. The weight of that responsibility should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a strange, unfamiliar peace. I want to do this right, he said suddenly. All of it. Vivian looked up from her name book. What does right mean to you, Elliot? I'm not entirely sure yet, he admitted. But I know it means being present. It means these children, Thomas, James, and Lily, will never doubt they're my priority. That's a start, Vivian said cautiously. A good one. The pregnancy became complicated during the 5th month. Vivian developed preeclampsia, requiring bed rest and constant monitoring. When Elliot learned of the diagnosis, he didn't hesitate. I'm moving back in, he announced, already packing an overnight bag. Just to help, he added quickly, seeing her startled expression. The guest room is fine. Elliot, you don't have to. I want to, he insisted. Please, Vivian. Let me do this. She relented, recognizing the practical necessity if nothing else. Her sister had her own family to care for, and hiring full-time help seemed impersonal for such an intimate situation. Elliot moved into the guest room that evening. He learned to cook simple, healthy meals. He attended to household tasks he'd previously relegated to cleaning services. He worked remotely, taking calls in the garden so as not to disturb Vivian's rest, and delegated more responsibilities than he'd ever thought possible. His colleagues were bewildered by his transformation. Marcus accused him of having a midlife crisis. The board questioned his commitment. Elliot weathered their doubts with newfound clarity. "My priorities have changed," he told them simply during an emergency meeting called to address his reduced schedule. "The company will survive. It's built to run without me micromanaging every decision." With all due respect, Marcus argued, "This isn't like you, Elliot. Reed Capital has always been your primary focus." "Things change," Elliot replied evenly. "People change. And if they don't, Marcus, they risk losing what really matters." The board ultimately accepted his new arrangement, albeit reluctantly. His reputation and the company's continued profitability spoke louder than their concerns. At home, Elliot and Vivian developed an unexpectedly comfortable routine. He brought her breakfast each morning and sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud from novels she enjoyed or simply talking. For the first time in years, they had real conversations, about politics and art and the world they wanted for their children. "Do you remember our first apartment?" Vivian asked one evening, her hands resting on her growing belly. "That tiny walk-up in Chelsea?" Elliot smiled at the memory. "With the bathtub in the kitchen and the radiator that sounded like a freight train. I was happier there than in any house we've had since," she admitted quietly. The confession hit Elliot like a physical blow. "I thought I was giving you everything you wanted. The houses, the vacations, the lifestyle. I wanted you, Elliot." Her voice held no accusation, just simple truth. Everything else was just stuff. He reached for her hand, his throat tight with regret. "I'm sorry I didn't understand that sooner." At 28 weeks, during a routine checkup, Vivian's blood pressure spiked dangerously. The doctor's expression turned serious as she examined the results. "I'm concerned about placental insufficiency," she explained. "The babies aren't getting enough nutrients, particularly baby C, James. We need to consider an early delivery." "How early?" Elliot asked, fear sharpening his voice. "Ideally, we'd make it to 32 weeks, but I'm not confident we'll get there. We need to prepare for the possibility of delivery within the next few days." Vivian's hand sought Elliot's, her fingers cold with fear. "They're too small," she whispered. "They're not ready." "Modern NICUs can do amazing things," the doctor assured them. "But we need to act in everyone's best interest." That night, Elliot made the most important phone call of his career. "Marcus, I need you to step up as acting CEO, effective immediately." "What?" "Elliot, what's happening?" "Family emergency," Elliot replied simply. "The babies are coming early. I don't know when I'll be back. Weeks, maybe months." There was a stunned silence, then, "Of course. Whatever you need. The company will be here when you're ready." "That's just it," Elliot said, watching Vivian sleep fitfully across the hall. "I'm not sure I'll ever be back in the same capacity. And I'm okay with that." 2 days later, as Vivian's condition deteriorated further, the decision was made. The triplets would be delivered by emergency C-section at just shy of 29 weeks. "I'm scared," Vivian admitted as they prepped her for surgery, tears streaming into her hair. "I'm right here," Elliot promised, holding her hand tightly. "I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever." The operating room was organized chaos, doctors and nurses moving with practiced efficiency, monitors beeping, voices calm but urgent. Elliot remained at Vivian's side, a steady presence behind the surgical drape. "Almost there," the surgeon announced. "Baby A coming now." A tiny cry, more mule than wail, broke through the clinical sounds. "It's Thomas," the doctor confirmed, passing the impossibly small infant to a waiting NICU team. "Is he okay?" Vivian asked desperately. "He's breathing," came the reply. "Baby be coming now." Lily emerged silent, her tiny body bluish until a neonatal specialist stimulated her, producing a weak cry that was the most beautiful sound Elliot had ever heard. James, the smallest at just over 2 pounds, required immediate respiratory support. The NICU team worked swiftly, attaching monitors and securing a breathing tube before rushing him to intensive care. "Go with them," Vivian urged Elliot as they closed her incision. "Don't leave them alone." The NICU became Elliot and Vivian's world for the next 6 weeks. They took shifts, one always present while the babies grew stronger. Thomas, the largest at 2 pounds, 9 ounces, progressed the quickest. Lily fought a series of infections but rallied with a determination that amazed her doctors. James, the smallest and most fragile, faced the greatest challenges: a heart murmur, bleeding in his brain, chronic lung issues. Elliot learned medical terminology he'd never wanted to know. He became expert at reading monitors, at the delicate art of changing diapers through incubator portholes, at the precise measurement of milliliters of breast milk Vivian painstakingly pumped for their tiny fighters. It was during these long nights, watching over incubators housing his fragile children, that Elliot fully confronted what he'd nearly lost through years of neglect. "Their hands are so perfect," he whispered one night, watching James grasp his pinky finger with surprising strength. "Every tiny fingernail, every knuckle." Vivian, exhausted but radiant, smiled from where she sat beside Thomas's incubator. "They know your voice already. Did you see how Lily turned when you came in?" "Did she?" Pride swelled in his chest at the thought. Hospital staff began to recognize them, offering encouragement and support as days stretched into weeks. Elliot, who once wouldn't wait 5 minutes for a late meeting, learned the virtue of patience. Each gram of weight gained, each milliliter of feed increased, became cause for celebration. "You're different with them," Vivian observed one afternoon as Elliot read softly to Lily during her kangaroo care session, the tiny infant nestled against his bare chest for skin-to-skin contact. "How do you mean?" "Gentle. Present. Completely focused." She adjusted Thomas against her own chest. "I never thought I'd see you this way." "I never thought I could be this way," he admitted. "But they make it easy, somehow. Everything else just falls away when I'm with them." If you're moved by Elliot's transformation so far, imagine what's coming next. Like and subscribe now to see the conclusion of this incredible journey of love and redemption. 6 weeks after their birth, Thomas was ready to go home. Lily followed a week later. James remained in the NICU, still requiring oxygen support but growing stronger each day. The day they brought Thomas and Lily home was both terrifying and exhilarating. The brownstone, once so spacious, suddenly seemed overrun with equipment, supplies, and the constant needs of 2 preemie infants, while their hearts remained partly in the hospital with James. "We need a system," Elliot said on their 3rd sleepless night, as Lily wailed in his arms while Thomas miraculously slept. "We're outnumbered, but we can be strategic." Vivian laughed, a genuine laugh he hadn't heard in years. Her hair was unwashed, dark circles underlined her eyes, but in that moment, she was radiant. "The great strategist applies his skills to diaper changes and feeding schedules," she teased, but there was warmth in her voice. They fell into an exhausted rhythm, days blending into nights and back again. Elliot learned each baby's cries, their preferences, the small details that made them individuals despite their shared beginning. Thomas was serious, watching everything with intense concentration. Lily was the peacemaker, content as long as she could see her brother nearby. And James, when he finally came home after another 2 weeks in the NICU, proved to be perpetually hungry, growing faster than his siblings once he began to thrive. The divorce papers remained untouched, their relevance fading as a new reality took shape around them. Morning sunlight filtered through the nursery blinds, casting golden stripes across the trio of cribs where the triplets slept. Elliot stood in the doorway, coffee cooling in his hand, simply watching the rise and fall of 3 tiny chests. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have paused for this moment. Now, he couldn't imagine missing it. "They're still asleep," Vivian whispered, appearing beside him. "All 3, he confirmed. "A miracle." She leaned against the doorframe, their shoulders almost touching. "We should sleep when they sleep. That's what all the books say." "And yet here we are," Elliot smiled, gesturing with his mug. "Here we are," she echoed, and something in her tone made him look at her more closely. In the soft morning light, with her hair messily piled on top of her head and wearing his old Harvard sweatshirt, she had never looked more beautiful to him. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until James's tiny whimper broke the spell. Both moved instinctively toward his crib. "I've got him," Elliot said, setting down his mug. "You made the 2 a.m. rounds." As he lifted his son, still so small but gaining strength daily, Elliot marveled at how natural this felt now. The terrified executive who'd once held James like a piece of fragile crystal had been replaced by a father who could change diapers, prepare bottles, and soothe cries with practiced ease. "Hey there, little man," he murmured, cradling James against his chest. "Let's let your brother and sister sleep a bit longer, shall we?" In the kitchen, he one-handedly prepared a bottle while James nuzzled against his shoulder. The domestic rhythm of their mornings, so different from his former life of pre-dawn emails and international calls, now felt like breathing. His phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus, with questions about the Johnson merger. Once, Elliot would have answered immediately, regardless of circumstance. Now, he silenced the ringer and continued feeding his son. Some things could wait. Some couldn't. "Is he taking the whole bottle?" Vivian asked, entering the kitchen with sleep-tousled hair. "Almost," Elliot replied. "His appetite gets stronger every day." She moved to the coffee maker, their morning dance now practiced and comfortable. "The pediatrician will be pleased. She's been concerned about his weight gain." "He's a fighter," Elliot said proudly. "All 3 of them are." "They get that from you," Vivian observed, surprising him. "That determination." "I think they get their best qualities from you," he countered softly. Their eyes met over James's downy head, a moment of connection that had become increasingly frequent. Not quite reconciliation, but something tentatively growing in the space where anger had once lived. If you've ever witnessed a transformation so profound it seemed like watching someone become who they were always meant to be, give this video a thumbs up. Share in the comments if you believe true priorities reveal themselves in life's unexpected moments. By the triplets' 4th month, Elliot had established a new normal at Reed Capital. He worked primarily from home, attended crucial meetings via video conference, and visited the office only when absolutely necessary. His executive team had adapted to his new priorities with varying degrees of acceptance. "The Singapore investors are insisting on meeting in person," Marcus reported during their weekly call. "They're uncomfortable finalizing without your physical presence." Once, Elliot would have been on the next flight. Now, he glanced at the triplets playing on their activity mat, Thomas intently batting at a hanging toy, Lily cooing at her reflection, James attempting to roll over, and made a different choice. "They can meet me via secure video conference, or they can wait until next quarter when I'll consider international travel again," he replied firmly. "The terms are solid, Marcus. If they walk over a handshake, they weren't serious to begin with." "This isn't like you," Marcus sounded frustrated. "No," Elliot agreed, watching Vivian enter the room and kneel beside their children. "It's better than me." That evening, after the triplets were finally asleep, Elliot found Vivian on the rooftop garden, their old sanctuary when city life became overwhelming. She stood at the railing, looking out over the twinkling Manhattan skyline, a glass of wine in hand. "First glass in over a year," she remarked as he joined her. "Feels strange." "You've earned it," Elliot said, leaning against the railing beside her. "Multiple times over." The night air carried a hint of autumn, the first crisp edge of the changing season. Below them, the city pulsed with its endless energy, but up here, they existed in a peaceful bubble. I turned down Singapore today, Elliot said after a comfortable silence. Vivian glanced at him. Big deal. Potentially. About 300 million. The significance wasn't lost on her. That's the same number you quoted the night we fought about our anniversary dinner. The one you couldn't miss. Ironic, isn't it? He gazed at the skyline, at buildings he'd helped finance. I used to think numbers like that defined success. And now? Now I measure success differently. He turned to face her fully. This morning, Thomas smiled at me. A real smile, not gas or reflex. Lily held her head up during tummy time longer than ever. James nearly rolled over. I know, Vivian said softly. I was there. That's just it, Elliot replied. I was there too. And it felt like witnessing miracles. Something shifted in Vivian's expression, a softening, a cautious hope. You really mean that? With everything I am, he confirmed. I've been thinking, Vivian. About us. About what happens next. She turned to him, her expression guarded. And? I love our children, he said carefully. More than I ever thought possible. They've changed everything for me, my priorities, my values, how I see the world. I know, she said softly. I've watched it happen. But it's not just about them. Elliot took a deep breath. Living here with you these past months, I've remembered why I fell in love with you. Your strength, your compassion, the way you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. Elliot. I'm not asking for reconciliation, he interrupted gently. I know I've broken your trust too many times. But I wonder if we might try something new, not resuming our old marriage, but perhaps building something different. Something better. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. I've been afraid to hope, she finally admitted. When you came back, I told myself it was temporary. That once the babies were older, you'd return to your old patterns. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, Elliot said. But I can promise that you and our children will always come first. Not work. Not ambition. You. Words are easy, she reminded him, but her expression had softened. Then let me show you, he said. One day at a time. In the quiet that followed, Vivian didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked, do you remember our first date? That little Italian place in the village? Cormaggio's, Elliot nodded, smiling at the memory. Where the owner kept calling you my bella fidanzata, and bringing us free tiramisu. It's still there, you know. She swirled the wine in her glass thoughtfully. My sister could watch the triplets. For a couple of hours. Hope bloomed in Elliot's chest. Are you suggesting? Dinner, Vivian clarified. Just dinner. A chance to talk without spit up on our clothes or interruptions every 5 minutes. I'd like that very much, he said simply. Their first date, if it could be called that, happened 2 weeks later. Elliot's mother came to watch the triplets while they went to dinner at the small Italian restaurant where they'd had their first meal as a married couple. Mr. Cormaggio recognized them immediately, his weathered face lighting up. The beautiful couple returns. So many years since I see you together. It was awkward initially, both hyper-aware of their complicated history. The small table, the intimate lighting, the bottle of wine between them, all felt both familiar and strange, like returning to a place once known but now slightly altered. This feels surreal, Vivian admitted, unfolding her napkin. Being out without diaper bags and strollers. Being anywhere without listening for cries, Elliot agreed. I keep checking my phone to make sure Mom hasn't called. She raised you. I think she can handle 3 infants for 2 hours, Vivian smiled. She reminds me of that regularly, Elliot laughed. As the evening progressed, they found themselves laughing about the baby's antics, sharing concerns about Thomas's reluctance to roll over, debating preschools that were years away. "Listen to us," Vivian said, smiling over her wine glass. "We're those parents who can't talk about anything but their children." "I wouldn't want to talk about anything else," Elliot realized aloud. In the candlelight, Vivian's eyes shimmered with something that looked like possibility. "You really have changed," she said wonderingly. "Not changed," Elliot corrected gently. "Remembered. The man I was supposed to be before ambition distracted me." When his hand covered hers across the table, she didn't pull away. The next day, Elliot made a decision that shocked the financial world. He announced his official transition to chairman of Reed Capital, stepping down as CEO and appointing Marcus to the position. The Wall Street Journal called it Reed's retreat. Business Insider questioned his mental health. The board demanded an emergency meeting to discuss the sudden and destabilizing leadership change. Elliot attended the meeting with a serenity that confounded them. Gone was the hard-driving perfectionist who terrorized underperforming managers. In his place was a measured, calm leader who spoke of sustainable growth, legacy planning, and balanced priorities. "This isn't a retreat," he explained to the concerned board members. "It's an evolution. Reed Capital was built to outlast any single leader. If it can't function without my daily involvement, then I've failed as a founder." "And these rumors about triplets?" one board member asked delicately. Elliot smiled, pulling out his phone to display the lock screen, a photo of Thomas, Lily, and James on their play mat. "Not rumors. The best thing that's ever happened to me." The image passed around the boardroom, softening even the most skeptical faces. By meeting's end, the transition plan was approved, with Elliot maintaining strategic oversight while relinquishing day-to-day operations. "You're really doing this," Marcus marveled as they left the building together. "I really am," Elliot confirmed, checking his watch, not for a meeting, but because it was nearly time for the triplets' afternoon feeding. "For them?" Marcus nodded at the phone still in Elliot's hand, the baby's image visible. "For all of us," Elliot corrected. "Myself included." As spring blossomed into summer, the triplets grew stronger, developing distinct personalities that amazed their parents daily. Thomas remained serious and observant, carefully studying tasks before attempting them. Lily became the social butterfly, smiling at everyone and vocalizing constantly. James, once the fragile one, transformed into a bundle of determined energy, reaching milestones sometimes ahead of his siblings. Vivian returned to the museum part-time, her curatorial expertise too valuable to remain untapped. Elliot adjusted his schedule to care for the triplets during her working hours, becoming adept at managing 3 increasingly mobile infants simultaneously. "How do you do it?" Vivian's sister asked during a visit, watching Elliot efficiently feed 2 babies while entertaining the third. "Carter can barely handle our one toddler without having a meltdown." "I ran a multi-billion-dollar company," Elliot replied with a wink. "This is just different stakes." "Higher stakes," Vivian corrected, entering with grocery bags. "The Johnson merger doesn't cry when its diaper needs changing." Their easy banter, the comfortable way they moved around each other, the shared jokes about parenthood, all pointed to something healing between them. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still carefully navigated certain topics, but the frost had thawed completely. One evening, as summer heat blanketed the city, they sat on a blanket in the small backyard, watching the triplets explore the grass, a novel texture that fascinated all 3. "I was thinking about taking them to see my parents next month," Elliot said casually. "They're not getting any younger, and they're eager to meet their grandchildren." "Connecticut in August?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious with 3 babies." "I was hoping you'd come too," he said, meeting her eyes. "As a family." The word hung between them, family, loaded with meaning and memory and possibility. "Is that what we are?" she asked quietly. "It's what I want us to be," Elliot answered honestly. "In whatever form that takes." Vivian watched Thomas determinedly crawling toward a dandelion. Your parents never approved of me. They thought I distracted you from your potential. They were wrong, Elliot said simply. About so many things. But especially about you. She considered this, then nodded slowly. Okay. Connecticut it is. The trip proved easier than anticipated. The triplets, now 8 months old, traveled surprisingly well. Elliot's parents, initially stiff and formal, melted completely in the face of 3 chubby-cheeked, identical-eyed grandbabies. They have the reed chin, his father observed gruffly, bouncing James on his knee with unexpected skill. And Vivian's smile, his mother added, watching Lily's face light up during peekaboo. That evening, after the triplets were asleep in portable cribs, Elliot found Vivian on the porch swing, looking out at the manicured grounds of his childhood home. They're different with the babies, she observed as he sat beside her. Warmer. Grandchildren are their second chance, Elliot said. To do better. Is that how you see this? Vivian asked, turning to him. Our second chance. The porch light illuminated half her face, leaving the other in shadow, a visual representation of the uncertainty still between them. I see it as our first chance to do it right, he replied. The past wasn't a marriage, Vivian. Not really. I was too focused on proving myself, on building something impressive. I was there physically, but never fully present. And now? Now I understand what matters. He reached for her hand tentatively. If you'll let me, I'd like to show you. Every day. She didn't answer immediately, but her fingers intertwined with his, a silent acknowledgement of possibility. If this story speaks to your heart, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. For those who believe in second chances and the power of transformation, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. By the triplets' first birthday, their family had found a new rhythm. Elliot maintained his chairman position, working primarily from home with occasional office visits. Vivian balanced her museum work with motherhood. The brownstone rang with baby laughter, first words, and the constant motion of 3 nearly walking 1-year-olds. The birthday celebration was small but joyful. Thomas solemnly smashed his cake, studying the texture with scientific curiosity. James devoured his portion and reached for more. Lily offered bites to everyone, generous even at one. They couldn't be more different if they tried, Elliot's mother observed, wiping frosting from Lily's outstretched hands. Yet they're completely connected, Vivian added. Watch how Thomas always checks where the others are before he ventures too far. As they cleaned frosting from 3 squirming bodies afterward, Vivian caught Elliot's eye. We're really doing this, she said, wonderment in her voice. Together, he confirmed, understanding all she meant. That night, after the last guest had departed and the triplets were finally asleep, exhausted from the excitement, Elliot retrieved a small box from his jacket pocket. I have one more gift, he said, finding Vivian curled on the living room sofa with a glass of wine. Elliot, you've already done so much for their birthday. This isn't for them, he interrupted gently. It's for you. For us. He placed the box in her hand, not a ring box, she noted with what might have been relief or disappointment. Inside lay a delicate silver key. What's this for? She asked, turning it in her fingers. A beach house, Elliot explained. On the North Fork. 3 bedrooms, right on the Sound. A place for us to take the triplets in summers, to build family memories. Vivian's eyes widened. You bought a house without telling me? I rented it, he corrected. For next month. To try out. If you like it, then yes, I'd like to buy it. But only if it feels right to all of us. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, the consideration of her input, the focus on family experience rather than possession, spoke volumes about how far he'd come. Thank you, she said softly. I'd love to see it. Later that night, after Vivian had gone to bed, Elliot retrieved the divorce papers from his desk drawer. He brought them to where she sat reading in the living room. I think we should address these, he said, placing them on the coffee table. Her face fell, but she nodded with resignation. You're right. We've been in limbo. Elliot picked up the papers, holding her gaze. Then, with deliberate movements, he tore them in half, then quarters. Elliot. I don't want a divorce, he said simply. I want to renew our vows instead. Not to continue what we had, but to start something new, with 3 beautiful reasons to get it right this time. Tears filled Vivian's eyes as she rose to meet him. Are you sure? More sure than I've ever been about anything, he promised. You and our children are my legacy, not any building with my name on it, not any fortune I've amassed. You. She took his face in her hands, searching his eyes for any doubt. Finding none, she leaned forward and kissed him, their first real kiss since before their separation. Yes, she whispered against his lips. To starting new. The beach house proved perfect, a weathered gray cedar shake cottage with a wide porch facing the Long Island Sound. The triplets, now toddling with increasing confidence, delighted in the sand, the shallow water, the seagulls that fascinated Thomas, the shells that Lily collected, the waves that James fearlessly splashed in. We should do it in September, Vivian said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset while the triplets slept inside. The vow renewal. Here. I'd marry you anywhere, Elliot replied, his arm around her shoulders. But this place feels right. Just family, she continued. The triplets, our parents, maybe a few close friends. Whatever you want, he agreed. This is your vision. She turned to him, moonlight silvering her profile. No, it's ours. That's the point, isn't it? Building something together. 6 months after the triplets' first birthday, on a beach at sunset, Elliot and Vivian renewed their commitment before a small gathering of loved ones. The triplets, now toddling unsteadily on the sand, served as ring-bearers and flower girl with considerable assistance from grandparents. Vivian wore a simple white dress that danced around her knees in the ocean breeze. Elliot stood barefoot in rolled khakis and a white linen shirt, looking more relaxed and genuinely happy than anyone had ever seen him. 15 years ago, I made promises I didn't fully understand, Elliot began, holding Vivian's hands in his. I promised presence but gave absence. I promised partnership but created distance. I promised forever but nearly walked away. A soft murmur passed through the small gathering. Few knew how close they'd come to divorce. Today, I make new promises with open eyes and a full heart, he continued. I promise to value what truly matters, not wealth or achievement or recognition, but love, family, connection. I promise to be present not just physically but emotionally, to listen not just with my ears but with my heart. I promise to partner with you in raising our beautiful children, in building our life together, in facing whatever challenges come our way. Tears streamed unchecked down Vivian's face as she spoke her own vows. 15 years ago, I married a man with a vision, she said. Today, I choose a man who has learned to see what's right in front of him. I promise to walk beside you, not behind you. To speak my truth and listen to yours. To forgive the past and build our future. To raise our children with the love and presence we both want for them. She squeezed his hands tightly. I promise to remember, in difficult moments, the man you've become, not the man you once were. As they exchanged rings, Thomas broke free from his grandmother's hold and toddled determinedly toward his parents. James and Lily, not to be outdone, followed suit. Laughter rippled through the gathering as Elliot scooped up Thomas while Vivian gathered Lily and James. I think they want to be included, Elliot smiled. They should be, Vivian agreed. This is for them too. The officiant, adapting seamlessly, concluded, with the blessing of your children and the witnesses gathered here, now pronounce you husband and wife, again, and better. The small reception that followed was joyful and relaxed, a beach barbecue with simple food, good wine, and children playing in the sand as the adults talked and laughed under string lights. Second chances are rare, Elliot told Vivian as they danced under the stars that night. I won't waste ours. It wasn't chance, she replied, her head resting against his chest. It was choice. Every day, we choose each other, our family, this life we're building. Looking toward where their children played under his mother's watchful eye, Elliot felt a completeness he'd never known in boardrooms or billion-dollar deals. The best choice I ever made, he whispered, was coming back to you. As the triplets grew, so did Elliot and Vivian's renewed relationship. They navigated the terrible twos, preschool applications, and the logistics of raising three same-age children with teamwork and patience neither had known in their first iteration of marriage. Elliot maintained his restructured role at Reed Capital, finding a balance that allowed him to contribute meaningfully to the company while prioritizing his family. The business world eventually stopped waiting for him to come to his senses and return to his former workaholic ways. The funny thing is, he told Vivian on the triplets' third birthday, watching their children navigate a backyard obstacle course he'd built, the company's more profitable now than when I was micromanaging everything. Almost like you built something that could succeed without consuming your entire life, she teased, leaning into his embrace. Almost like what matters most was right in front of me all along, he replied. On Christmas Eve, 5 years after Vivian's pregnancy announcement had changed everything, they sat together in their living room, the same brownstone where they'd nearly ended their marriage, now filled with evidence of their thriving family. The triplets, now 4.5, were finally asleep after the excitement of hanging stockings and leaving cookies for Santa. Remember that Christmas? Vivian asked softly, curled against Elliot on the sofa. When you were going to sign the divorce papers? How could I forget, he replied, kissing the top of her head. It was the Christmas everything changed. I was so scared, she admitted. Telling you about the pregnancy. I thought you'd just write a check and continue with the divorce. I considered it, Elliot acknowledged honestly. For about 30 seconds. Then I realized it wasn't just about financial responsibility. It was about the man I wanted to be. Vivian shifted to look up at him. When did you know? That you wanted to try again with us, not just co-parent? Elliot considered the question carefully. There wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 tiny realizations. Watching you handle the high-risk pregnancy with such grace. Seeing you with the babies in the NICU. Coming home to find you singing to them even when you were exhausted. He traced her cheek gently. But I think I always loved you, Vivian. I just lost sight of what that meant, what it required of me. And now, she asked. Now I know that love isn't a feeling to be experienced passively. It's a choice you make every day, in how you spend your time, where you direct your attention, what you prioritize. He kissed her softly. I choose you. I choose us. Every day. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the city just as it had that fateful Christmas Eve. But this time, Elliot wasn't alone in a sterile penthouse contemplating the end of his marriage. He was home, surrounded by the warmth of family, the echoes of children's laughter, the promise of Christmas morning excitement. Merry Christmas, Elliot, Vivian whispered. Merry Christmas, my love, he replied. The first of many more. Friends, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Mr. Stephen Stories. If you believe in the power of transformation and second chances, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, it's never too late to choose what truly matters in life. Thank you for joining me on this journey of love, redemption, and the courage to change. Elliot Reed's greatest success wasn't the billions he made or the buildings that bore his name. It was the morning Thomas ran into their bedroom with a lost tooth, the afternoon Lily performed her first dance recital, the evening James built a science project with his help. It was family dinners and bedtime stories and vacation memories. It was the quiet moments with Vivian, building a love stronger than the one they'd nearly lost. His legacy wasn't carved in corporate letterhead or stock portfolios. It lived in the 3 children who carried his eyes and Vivian's smile, and in the marriage that proved sometimes the most valuable things in life are those we almost throw away.